bringing these parts down to more square, and this more square. We're gonna leave the top as it is. Yeah. With fade underneath. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the front you're gonna leave long, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So you can get your Michael Jackson on. Wow, Mo, this is a major treat because I think you're brilliant.
Oh, thank you, bro.
You're brilliant, and I think you're a source of healing for me for sure. And I'm hoping that today, the audience listening will also experience that sense of healing that you always provide for me off camera. You know?
Yeah.
You have anything you want to say before, to the audience or anything before we begin?
I want to start off with a story, if I could.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay.
While I'm prepping.
So there's a client of mine some time ago, a working professional who was a paralegal. She was in pursuing her legal degree, and at the time of her pursuit, she was engaged to an attorney who they both was trying to co-create this power couple construct.
Mm-hmm.
And in light of that, of course, when you're pursuing rigorous goals, you have tension because you're trying to manage your life, you're trying to manage your goals, you're trying to manage the relationship and all the different things that happens, as you climb. As time went on in that relationship, she started to feel ignored,
Mm.
um, somewhat even invisible certain times.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that she started to participate in is on the weekends, she picked up a side job bartending. And when she was a bartender, she met this gentleman who told her that, you could actually be like, you're a really good conversationalist, you make people feel comfortable. What do you think about becoming a masseuse, like massaging and helping people to feel comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Well, long story short, she thought about it for weeks and then decided, let me give this guy a call and see what he has to offer. She gives the guy a call. They start to link and talk about the negotiations, and he gave her a hefty price tag and how he could, benefit her for the weekend. That turned into coming into sessions on the weekend, and then next thing you know, she's doing kind of soft prostitution.
Mm.
And part of that was one looking outside in, you would say, wow, how could she be a prostitute? I mean, she's pursuing her legal degree, she's getting engaged. But if we take a closer look with a microscope, what was happening is that in her relationship, she was feeling like the goals were more important than the actual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that her fiance was ignoring her. And if we go a little bit more deeper, that actually was connected to a childhood construct of her actually feeling like when she was a teenager, she was always invisible, she was always ignored, and that her relationships were more performative. So what she did to cope with that childhood scar was enlist herself in the act that was partially degrading because that was a coping mechanism she decided to pursue. And so I start off with that story is because coping mechanisms look different for all of us. They unpack and they unfold in different ways for all of us. Mm-hmm. Some are positive coping mechanisms. Some are destructive mechanisms. Some are denial, meaning people are actually not even aware that they're under a coping mechanism construct. And so, like, as we unpack this in our session, I wanted to share that story is because it can look in different ways. Mm-hmm. And we sometimes are not aware of the things that we pick up to cope in our trauma, to cope in our pain, or the very thing that's causing us a level of distress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. First thing I would like to start with after that story is what is coping? If you can explain that to us as if we're high school students.
Yeah. So when you think about, let's break this down. When you think about coping, because coping is it's a level of existing, right? You're existing, but you're not existing in your full body. You're existing in a way that it almost feels like an analogy I can use is if I place you in the freezer, I'm still preserving you, but there's still certain parts of you that are frozen.
Mm.
And of course, if I defrost you, all the dressings and seasonings and all that stuff will start to unveil and then it's prepared to cook. But if I keep you in freezer, it doesn't kill you, but it keeps you just numb enough just to get through, just to get past. And it helps to kind of preserve you, but you're not actually thawed out fully. So when I say coping, coping is the existence of partially existing until you get to a place of rest.
Okay. So I was thinking about it earlier. In Philadelphia, Philadelphia has a history of redlining. For those who don't know, redlining is when politicians, banks pull out a geographical map of a particular area and deem some areas hazardous, meaning red, and they therefore weren't going to invest in those areas or make them suitable to sustain a healthy living. And that was done probably in the 40s or 50s, all the way up to 2024, where I find that people who live in those communities, mainly Black people or people of color, typically have a strong mistrust for other people in their communities because what redlining did was make people poor and sustained it. So mistrusting folks around you is a way for other folks to cope in these communities. Is that an accurate assessment of what coping can be?
I think that that's closer to what coping could be.
Okay.
I think that just to expand a little bit on what you said in terms of distrust, I think that when you think about redlining and what that has done to the African American community or to the disenfranchised audience, is that if I feel powerless and I feel like there's nothing more for me to do, and I feel like I can't change my situation, which is false, then in the meantime, I'll pick up a coping mechanism. I'll pick up something that can help ease the distress. I'll pick up something that can help me coast my way until said situation has changed. And so if we have a group of target audience that feels Black, let's say Black folks, for example, the product of redlining is that you build systems that keeps me oppressed and keeps me on one side of a particular landscape, and you make it so difficult for me to change that construct where I'm stuck. I know there's more, I want more, and I can see more, but I feel like I can't get over there. So instead of feeling that pain, that oppressive pain that comes with feeling stuck, I need something that can help me survive. I need something that can help me just bear the weight. And that's when one starts to select a coping mechanism. And that could be positive or negative. And so when we say, oh, well, why are these people like this? Why are these areas so drug infested? Why do they not take care of their communities? Why are these people are basically coping? They're doing the best that they can. And what we're seeing in those particular communities is the consequence of a group of people in a coping mechanism construct. I can't change. It's so painful. I'll smoke it up. I'll drink it up. I'll infest it up. I'll do all the things that I need to do to keep me numb until said situation change. Those are examples of negative coping mechanisms.
What is a positive coping mechanism?
Okay, so some positive coping mechanisms. And we need to be careful when I say positive because even the positive mechanism without balance can be destructive. So I've had situations where genetically someone had a weight issue, and their parents were overweight, their parents was overweight, and they found that in time they were starting to gain weight. So in order to avoid said situation, they would overly exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise so much so where they would just get sick.
Mm.
But their coping mechanism is that if I can exercise excessively, what happened to my parents and their parents would never happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
So although exercising could be a positive way to decompress and to release and to get the stress out, if done without balance or with a level of awareness, also could be destructive. I think some good positive coping mechanisms that one can participate in is getting into a session of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy, journaling, having an inner circle, a group of people where you meet and y'all connect and y'all talk about the different things that matter to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Another could be art, drawing. It's those things, it's those productive things that you do while you wait for said situation to change. Why would I be coping? If I'm in a relationship with somebody that I want to be in and things are going well, what am I coping? No, I'm existing. Coping means that there's a situation that's happening that's causing distress, and I need something in the meantime to help me to feel better. Something. It could be a drink. It could be multiple partners. It could be whatever that is. No judgment here. It's just I just need something to ease the thrust of that pain that I'm feeling. So we cope. When we talk about mechanism is the vehicle by which one uses to get to said coping process.
Mm-hmm.
So coping is the actual act. Mechanism is the tool, the vehicle that's being used. So mechanism could be a drug, could be a drink, could be, being promiscuous. Those are the mechanisms that we use to cope. So you marry those together. Coping mechanism is adopting a mechanism to help one cope in any matter.
So does coping also relate to basically lack of self-awareness?
Um, it could be.
And is that the mechanisms that are created are a way to function?
Well, coping could be attached to the lack of self-awareness, but coping can also be attached to a person who's extremely aware of themselves,
Mm.
in that they already know how they will respond to said situation, so they get ahead of it and adopt that coping mechanism before the trauma happens. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're unaware. They could be also very aware of themselves, and they're trying to avoid said outcome, and so they go into coping mode.
It's interesting because you shared a book, Framework for Understanding Poverty by Ruby K. Payne.
Mm-hmm.
And she was breaking down poverty in general, whether it be people in red line communities or people who live in trailer homes in middle America, or just poverty in general. There's certain type of behaviors that are going to come about from that poverty. So if I live in if I'm poor, regardless of where I am in America, distrust for other folks could be a way. I'm aware of the fact that I was wronged by somebody in my community. Therefore, I don't trust anyone in my community, so I won't have to deal with that hurt ever again.
Yeah.
Is that a form of coping?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Great. I'm glad you pointed it out. So that's another form of coping. Sorry, because what happens is, in that example, what a person has done, their mechanism that they've used is denial and numbing.
Mm-hmm.
And in that example, it's almost like once you've hurt several times, the way you cope through life is you just won't feel again. And if you don't feel again, that means you just won't trust again. You'll put everybody in the bucket that they'll hurt you. You'll put everybody in the bucket that they'll betray you. And so you begin to move through life to avoid feeling that pain that you felt again. So your coping mechanism is that I just won't connect. I won't connect with people. I won't trust people, regardless of what their intentions are, regardless if they won't do it again. I won't even opt into a process to even think that you could be anything otherwise. You're automatically a person that I would distrust. And those type of people, unfortunately, they do exist. But again, we talked in our conversation before. We don't say anymore, why, why are you doing this? We want to ask the person, why are you that way?
Right.
And
Right.
when we understand why they're that way, we participate in the process where we can extend grace. We know that they're coping. They're coping the best way. There's a scar, there's a deep seated pain that happened to them. They're imprisoned by it and they don't want to feel it again. When we think about our brains is actually wired to help us to not feel pain again, even if it's to our demise.
Mm.
That's the brain's role.
Mm-hmm.
So that person is saying, I never want to feel betrayed again. The brain is saying, here's a way you can do this. Lock everybody out. Don't let anybody in. Distrust most folks. And here's a solution. You won't feel it again. But what the brain is not saying is how that makes you an imprisoned person. That makes you a person that basically is walking dead.
It's funny you say that because essentially it sounds like coping, whether positive or negative, is a way to avoid feeling pain.
That's correct.
But if you don't feel pain, then how can you possibly grow?
Absolutely. Because pain is direction. Pain is direction. That's a part of your process. And this is one of the things I've even been learning personally, even as a practitioner. Pain expands you. So to not feel the pain, you're missing out on your development process.
Right.
You can't develop to a higher self or a more healthier self unless you can feel your pain. To delay the feeling of the pain makes you a very destructive and unstable person. Because we all know it just takes that one situation that'll make a person snap. That's a person who hasn't dealt with their own pain.
Right.
So you can cope, 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 cope. Coping is basically the substitute.
Right.
We want to get you out of the substitute to being actually the authentic thing.
Right.
And that's the process.
It's funny because we're in Philadelphia, and right now we have a huge heroin crisis that's in Kensington.
Yeah.
People from all over the nation go to Kensington to be able to cope with some type of pain. It's possible.
Right.
With some type of pain they've experienced, and they're using that heroin as a substitute. Is that a good analogy?
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. I mean, Kensington in itself, when you walk through that landscape, you see a bunch of people self-selecting or participating in. I mean, you have, I call them leaning towers.
Yeah.
These people are standing on corners just leaned out.
Mm-hmm.
And all that's under that muck is undealt with pain, undealt with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And how they're coping is through the act of drugs.
Mm. And
that's their coping mechanism.
And that's interesting because I feel like at this moment in America, a lot of us are very separate from each other. I think we've developed habits of not listening to one another in order to not feel pain.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it be educational, hard information.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all coping by being tribalistic.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I mean, we're under a very divisive ecosystem right now. It's very divisive. Mm-hmm. And all of us deal with them in different ways.
Right.
And unfortunately, the more resources you have, the more devastating or the more self-destructive the coping mechanism could be. So, given what we're experiencing right now as just Americans, us against them, and what will our future look like? What leaders will be in place to assure that it's equitable? All of those different things. While we wait to see the said outcome, all of us are participating in some form of coping.
Right.
And so, some could be workaholics, some could be shopping. Because think about it, not knowing what the outcome can be can really create anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And anxiety makes me like, that's why people are on anxiety pills. I have to find something to ease that anxiety, which again plays into a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we think about how divisive things are right now and how we bring it full circle, I want to make sure we color this as that a coping mechanism is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a survival attribute.
Mm-hmm.
But what we want to encourage is more of the coping mechanisms that produce fruit versus, well, produce positive fruit that actually will be, that can replicate into even more stronger things when you get to said destination versus coping mechanisms that destroy you.
Right.
That when you get to the place that you want to be in, you'll be actually no more good.
Right.
And that's what redlining, that's what racism, that's what all those different things, we're looking at the byproduct of participating in coping mechanisms that were supposed to be just for a little while has now become a lifestyle and a part of a demographics construct, and that's painful to me.
Mm-hmm. A while ago, you talked to me about righteous behavior,
Yeah.
right? And how that's also a lifestyle. For me, I recognize during Trump's presidency, I was not trying to listen to or hear anything a Trump supporter had to say or Republican had to say. And a fitness journey that I had started, basically getting fit, finding balance, reading, exercising, spiritual journeys, have made me look inward at how I was responding to people who I really should be listening to, because I think if I understand people's perspectives, it'll help me communicate my perspective, but it has to start with listening.
Yeah.
And in return, I developed a habit of wanting to listen to people I disagree with and receive hard information. And it helped me become a better human being.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a habit that I created off of a conversation that we had. Just trying to be righteous, just making that my lifestyle.
Yeah. Because when you think about, what they call identity politics or performative politics or race politics, when you listen to people who have opposing ideas when it comes to this political shit show, you have to think about everybody's perspective was coming from me, and how would these leaders and the decisions that they make will impact me and my family.
Right.
And so, of course, what's important to me and what I'm trying to protect is going to be different from what the other man is trying to protect for his family.
Right.
Well, of course, we're going to have different perspectives because there's certain things that are important to me that needs to be in place and certain things that's important to them. Where we start to go left or right is when I expect for you to care about what my issues are more than you care about yours.
Right.
And so the hard part, which is why it makes a leader so important, is to make all these disagreeable factors or variables on the table and find a consensus, find a way to bridge and bring these opposing variables together so that there's a compromise. There's some things that are going to get for me, some things are going to get for them, and then we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
But the way it's being led is that it's either just this way or no way.
Mm-hmm.
It's either these things or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, circling back to our topic at hand, if one particular party is saying we can see better for you than you can see for yourself, we know what's best for you more than you know what's best for you, and I start to feel like, wait a minute, I have no control or say over what's best for me, what do?
Mm-hmm.
I participate in coping. I participate in the act of coping because I sense danger, I sense harm, I sense something's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And to avoid from the idea of me hurting myself or my family, I cope.
Mm.
I find something that can hold me together until situations change or until I can see another ray of light.
Right.
And that's again, that's what we do as humans. But when you talk about again the divisive landscape that we're in right now, the us versus them, I think that's a good practice that you've secured, though, Paul. When you said you listen to opposing thoughts, I can listen to you doesn't mean I'm gonna agree. Listening to your opposite idea of what you see for your family or America, etc., shouldn't rock what's happening in my world. I can listen. I can listen. We can disagree. I may be able to shed some light in some areas that you may be blind to. You may be able to bring a perspective or shed some light in areas that I may be blind to.
Mm-hmm.
And then we walk away disagreeable, but we agreed that, okay. But to shut it out and to not hear it, which is another form of coping, it's called denial.
Right.
So when those of us who participate in the act of denial, they're coping too, because to deny it means it's not here. Look at what we've done with African American storytelling. Look at what's happening where we talk about reckoning, having a historical reckoning. One of the ways that people move forward when we talk about race relations is that let's not even talk about what happened in terms of enslaving these black bodies. Let's get that out of the curriculum. Let's not even talk about history. Let's not even tell the complete story of what happened in terms of how this nation was created. Let's just move forward as is. Let's just move. What was done is done. It's buried. Let's move forward. That's another way to cope, which is denying that any of that happened. Let's not explore it. Let's just move forward. But see, that's not going to lead to healing.
Can I ask you this?
Sure.
In that example you use, and this goes to the white audience who is viewing this.
Yeah.
Is it possible that when the white audience hears things like critical race theory or uh,
Mm-hmm.
Black history or anything about the 619 Project, or even something that could be even more nuanced, post-traumatic slave syndrome,
Yeah.
does those theories make people feel pain of the challenge their belief systems of themselves, and knowing that this is a great nation, but there's still room for improvement.
Absolutely.
So therefore, could they be coping by not wanting to step into the pain or embrace the pain, but more or less ignore it and tell themselves a different story so they can never embrace the pain, therefore stunning growth?
Yeah. Absolutely. And then also in conjunction to what you just said is the idea that we here in America we're always promoting pleasure, pleasure, pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And nobody's really talking about in order to really experience, and audience, I need you to really catch this. In order to really experience the best pleasure is to deal with your pain. Because when you deal with your pain, then you can really show up and feel the pleasure in your body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about like, you know, let's use critical race theory or those hard subjects, the nuanced thing that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
In order for us to move forward, we got to talk about all of the hurtful things that happened before us.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get a little bit of micro though. What we're asking people to do is to deal with the pain. And a lot of the people, especially when we talk about the white audience, they haven't even they haven't reconciled that they're the descendants of those people who participated in the enslavement of black bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't reconciled with that. And so we're basically taking information and we're saying, that's why you can hear them say, we didn't, that wasn't us. Why do we keep talking about this? We didn't enslave people. We didn't beat people or oppress people. They did us. So why are we punishing? Why are we being punished for what they did? But the real conversation should be not only did you not do it, but it's a part of your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
You're a beneficiary of what said group of folks have done. And let's unpack the history of what happened so that we can create something new
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
versus continue to cope in that they ignore and deny, and we continue to be angry and upset because we're being ignored and denied.
Right. And that's also one thing I learned by reading The Debt by Randall Robinson, was a gentleman named Jim Brown.
Yeah.
Jim Brown was a white minister who believed that slavery was against his belief systems. Therefore, he fought physically to fight against slavery. And now I wanted white America to hear that, because it's really important that while African Americans suffered, we also had allies. Nothing great can be done alone. And what you choose, when you know better, you do better. And you can choose to be a part of history, the right side of history, by embracing pain, but also discovering new things about yourself and how you want to exist in it.
Right.
But in order to do that, you got to show up in the gym. You got to go in with the intention of feeling pain to grow, not overdoing it, but just enough so that we develop properly.
That's right.
And healthily. So white America, if you're still listening to this, I really do hope you're absorbing these new techniques, or just, or helping build greater self-awareness by what we're talking about. I hope you're challenging yourself to feel pain, to deal with uncomfortable conversations, to sit in it. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when I'm talking to somebody like a Trump supporter, it's painful to listen to them sometimes. It's painful to listen to someone rant, or it's painful to listen to somebody sometimes, and I know that they could be factually incorrect, but I still sit there and listen. And sometimes I have a whole different perspective of said person. America is a really big place, and it's vast, and there's a lot of nuanced perspectives out there. And I am going to do my very best to try to listen to all of them, just so I can become a better human being. And I hope you'll do the same. You have anything you want to add, Mo?
Yeah, I would just say coping mechanisms in itself could be, a tool. It could be a very helpful instrument if utilized properly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We all do it. We all participate in it. So it's not, I want to walk away with, it's okay to cope. It's okay to have coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
But do your best to find coping mechanisms that are productive, that are life-bearing, that will help bring you forth to said destination and not destroy you while you wait for the very said situation to change.
What are some tools people can use to avoid coping?
Well, I feel like we don't want folks to avoid coping.
Okay.
What we want them to do is avoid remaining in a lifelong relationship with coping mechanisms.
Hold on 1 second, Mo. What does that mean?
Meaning, if I had my way as a practitioner, instead of you, okay, so I would say, let's say you have a particular traumatic experience happening to you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Of course, you're going to participate in some coping mechanism until it changes.
Mm-hmm.
But ideally, depending on what the coping mechanism is, you could be more submitted to the coping mechanism than the actual transformation or the change that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that I don't want you to cope. I don't want you to remain in a negative relationship with your coping mechanism. I don't want you to participate in drugs or taking pills or being in denial or any type of psychological coping mechanism that will hinder you from getting the healing that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think tools, one of the most powerful tools, and of course, I'm going to promote it, is therapy.
Right. Right.
Therapy is going to help you
Right.
because, for me to give you like a blanket toolkit, it depends on the situation. What works for you may not work for me.
Right.
So it's participating in the act of getting therapy. That is mental hygiene.
And I think I'm going to help you promote therapy as well because no one's perfect. No one's perfect. But I think the more you discover about yourself, the more you can change things about yourself to improve.
Yeah.
Like I've been on a fitness journey for a long period of time, and I started taking Muay Thai, and as a result, it opened me up to other areas in my body that I need to be working on to become more suited for this new activity.
Yeah.
And I find that like therapy could be that for a lot of us in the sense that it's going to push us to be our greater selves. What we can't see is actually more harmful than what we can see.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, Mo, I think again, I really do hope the audience is nourished by this. I think you're so nourishing to me.
Yeah.
Like big time. Every time you come into the barbershop is almost like I'm actively getting help,
Appreciate that, Paul.
I'm just so happy we crossed paths. That you really are a true blessing. Hold on one second. Let me just blow dry you out.
Okay.
Like big time. Like you know, the fact that you are gracious enough to come up here and have this conversation, the audience should really be receiving. This is a treat that most people don't get an opportunity to get. And for that, I thank you, man. Again, big time.
Happy to be here, happy to serve, and hopefully folks walk away with some good good items to process. Thanks for having me.
Especially during these times. Yeah. Hold on a second. Let me just see if I can add some form to this.
Yeah, right. It looked like a plucked chicken.
No. Yeah, I think all 2023 embracing pain has been my action basically the whole year.
Yeah.
And I think it's been extremely beneficial. Whether it be emotional pain, spiritual pain, physical pain, embracing it, because it's definitely made me stronger. I can tolerate so much more because of it.
Good.
Now, are habits also coping, or is that different?
That's a bit different. The habits are built into. Yeah, that's a bit different than coping mechanism.
Okay.
A set of habits could fall into how you cope, but the habits, we can unpack that in a different time.
Okay. So right now, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Well, Parham, I love you as always, man.
Yeah,
I hope the
bro.
audience too. I really, Parham, you amazing, man.
Thank you, bro.
Again, audience, like if y'all had this type of person in your life, trust me, it'll just transform you. Like Parham goes a long way to do what he can do for his community and people around him and his clients. Are you working on anything you want to promote right now?
Not at this. It's some things in the making, but it's not ready for publicity yet. But
Okay.
I'll be in our next session. I'll unveil those.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah,
I love
I'll
you,
unveil
man.
those. Yeah, yeah.
Appreciate y'all. Peace.
All right.